It's time for the Everyman, where real man talk.
Let's go. Time to grind, get inside your mind. Yeah, we working overtime. That's the only way to climb. We gon' make it in our prime. Signing on the dotted line, cashing checks left and right. That's the way I'm living life.
Hello, good morning, and welcome to the Everyman podcast. Today we have a very special guest. We have Sarah Townsend, who is a copywriter and a best-selling author. How are you doing today, Sarah?
I'm really good, thank you, despite the fact that it's 8 a.m. and I'm not normally podcast recording this early in the morning. It's nearly the weekend, all good.
Yeah, it's a new one for us, actually. We had a recording last night, actually. So some of us, so me and Ethan, who's on the podcast today, I don't know what time we finished last night. I would say about 10 o'clock. And then straight back into another, which is great, actually. I'm loving it. Ethan was definitely complaining this morning, saying, "Oh, I can't do these early mornings after a late night." But
I'm so sorry.
no.
I was. You know, I'm 30 now and I can't handle it. You know, if I was 29, I'd be fine. But you know, once you hit 30, it's game over. But no, you know, I'm loving having Sarah on and the energy. We've had a pre-chat as well, and Sarah's energy's great this morning. So I'm feeding off that, and I'm raring to go. Don't worry.
Is that the podcast hangover gone and you're awake and ready for it?
I mean, I wouldn't go that far, but I'm on the way.
You're on the way. Okay, glass of water. That's it. Fresh air. Get outside. All works. Matthew, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm all right. I'm used to being up early with clients, so this is kind of a bit of a lie-in for me. I think I've got an hour or so, but I'm used to getting up at 5 a.m. So it's not any different than usual, to be fair. But yeah, I'm good this morning. Looking forward to be on the podcast. Shame I couldn't be on last night, but it's the work of being a personal trainer all hours.
Yeah, the joys. Well, I think that's probably a great way for us to lead into what today's conversation is about. So, Sarah, you have wrote 2 books, but I suppose for our audience and the one that's probably most relevant will be your survival skills for freelancers. So essentially within that book, I didn't write the book. You're definitely going to tell us way more about the book than I'm able to do in this intro. But essentially it talks about all the common myths and the ways that people can cope with being a freelancer. I think what was really interesting when I read the book was around how it helps people not just deal with how to be a freelancer in terms of the headline stuff. It actually goes into probably a deeper layer of context around some of the struggles people will face when they're freelancing. And it's not just the actual tasks of being a freelancer, it's also around their mental health and how they look after themselves to make sure that they can optimally freelance in the best way possible. So I think it's a really incredible book, and it's something that we are obviously going to be discussing today as well. So, but before we get into that, Sarah, I'd be really interested to understand a little bit more about you and our guests to understand a bit about you, your career, and how you came to writing a book. So just before.
Yeah, so I have been a freelance copywriter for 24 years now. I was actually working in an agency down in Bristol, loved my job, but then became pregnant with my daughter. And she's about to turn 24 and really didn't want to continue the agency life when I was a mum. I just wanted a job that would fit around having a new family. But I found myself very much in this position where I was doing 2 things that I'd never done before and I knew nothing about. And the first one was being a freelance business owner, and the second one was being a parent. And I kind of struggled through my first, I'd say 10 years, because bear in mind that when I started out as a freelancer in 1999, there was no social media, there were no online communities, there were none of those real positive things that we now have to support ourselves through freelance life. And I really struggled with the isolation. I struggled with the feeling that I had to do everything myself, which of course isn't the case at all. I had no boundaries. I had no work-life balance. It put an incredible strain on my relationships. And my marriage ended. I wouldn't say it was as a result of that, but certainly it was a contributing factor. And so 20 years later, I'm doing freelance much better. Worked out the ways for myself, kind of the hard way, on how to deal with those challenges that we don't expect. And it was before lockdown and just the start of 2020. I thought, I'm going to write a book about this, because I felt like I'd learned enough by making these mistakes that I could tell people in a really open, honest, heart on your sleeve type of way, very emotionally kind of honest, how I dealt with these challenges, so that they didn't have to make the same mistakes. They could kind of shortcut the messy challenges of self-employment and become successful and confident and get more enjoyment from self-employment. And yeah, the book it's not just my voice throughout. It's also got quotes and case studies from 100 freelancers in all different areas. So graphic designers, I've even got a painter and decorator in there, I've got a builder in there, because I think we quite often forget that freelancers come in all shapes and sizes. And it's since sold in 28 countries and helped freelancers and small business owners around the world to grow in confidence and to tackle those challenges that we don't expect. Yeah.
Do you know what? I think what I found the most interesting when reading it actually was that perspective, was around the fact that there was essentially the problem statement of what the myth is, then it would be the reality of what actually happens. Then you gave advice, and then what you've just touched on there. What I found really amazing was there was all these different perspectives of how to what really happens. So it's not actually just the voice of Sarah, as you say, it's the voice of all these different experts, and they are experts because they have that lived experience to be able to pass on their knowledge and experience of what's happened. Yeah, and I definitely found that really interesting, because then the book is actually not designed. So your background, having read the book, is within marketing. So some people would say, well, Sarah's in marketing, I'm a builder, for example. Why would this book work for me? Or Slater, I'm sure, who's obviously a PT, very similar. He works as a freelance PT. He does have a contract with a gym and things, but at face value, when people see Sarah's a marketer, I'm not sure if this book would be for me, because I don't work in marketing. What was truly incredible, it's not just for people who work in marketing. It's generally made for people who freelance, and I really found that interesting. How did you get that balance in terms of when you're writing the book, from your own lived experience and then making sure that you had all of those different sort of perspectives?
I thought having perspectives and the voice of other freelancers in there was vital, because my voice is just my voice, my experience is just my experience. And even though from researching while I was writing the book, I realized just how many people out there were struggling from the same issues. They were struggling from not having any work-life balance and not knowing how to set boundaries and not realizing that it was okay to take control and take back this feeling of you're the boss. And so many of us kind of instead let our clients, our freelance clients, set the tone, dictate how much they're going to pay and dictate the hours that we work. Are they messaging you over the weekend, and are you kind of jumping and going, oh, my clients message me, I need to message them straight back? Actually setting those boundaries and saying, look, my working hours are whatever works for you, because ultimately we go freelance, we're kind of trying to get away from that 9 to 5. We're kind of needing to listen to what works for us and understand our own positive working patterns. For you, getting up at 8 a.m. and starting work straight away might not be the best way that you work. You might prefer to get up later, do a bit of exercise first thing in the morning and then start later on in the day. That's absolutely fine. Your clients don't need to know even the hours that you're working. As long as you get the job done, as long as you're reliable and fun to work with, that's great. But I forgot what the question was. Sorry.
No, it's absolutely fine. It was probably more, you did answer it. So it was around, how did you balance getting your own perspective in there and then the voice of other people?
Yeah, no, I think that the things like imposter syndrome, when I started talking to other people and realizing, okay, so it's not just, this was part of the reason why I wrote the book in the first place. It was more talking to other freelancers out there in different areas. And Slater, I've got a guy who is a Pilates instructor. He went from being a financial advisor to being a Pilates instructor full time. And he swears by this book. He's recommended it to so many people. And he was just starting out as a freelancer at the time the book came out. And it just shows, I think, because I don't talk about marketing specifically, it is all about what's in here, the kind of mental health challenges, but also the ways in which our mindset gets in our own way, and we have a lack of confidence, and we think we're the only person feeling the isolation or the loneliness or the need to do everything for your business, whereas actually outsourcing is key, and that's one of the myths that I bust. You can't do everything for your business. You can't. You might feel confident. So say me as a copywriter, I feel super confident with my skills as a copywriter and an editor. I can take any document, however much of a mess it's in, and I can transform it and make it into something great. That's my superpower. But that in itself is not enough to become a successful freelancer. You have to appreciate that there's a lot of pressure. You have to do your own accounts, your own IT, your own admin, your own social media management, all these things. But actually, do you, when you realize that you can outsource and you can spend more time doing the things that you love, and the reason you went self-employed in the first place, that actually helps with those feelings of self-worth, because you're not getting to the end of the week and finding, God, I've spent 40% of my week this week doing things A, I don't know how to do, B, I'm not good at, and C, they're not making me money. So at the end of the week, if you spent half your week doing the admin, doing the marketing, doing the IT support for yourself, you can end up feeling like, God, I'm not very good at this. And that has really negative impacts on your self-worth. So the more you can set those boundaries, the more you can talk, I think, about the things like imposter syndrome and realize everybody gets it. 86% of UK professionals in a study admitted, and this is male and female, from the intern to the CEO, quite literally, admit to experiencing imposter syndrome, for example, and that's just one of the challenges. So when we talk about these things, we're taking the power out of them. We're taking the power back ourselves.
Yeah,
that's the thing, isn't it? Really, and it's quite a niche way you've approached the book, as Lewis has said, Sarah. Just the fact that you're taking so many different areas from so many different people. It's not just you and your friends in one sector. You go on, like you say, your Pilates instructor, which is quite relatable to Slater. I mean, obviously, we all know what imposter syndrome is. Just for sort of the every man sort of, or every woman listening to the podcast, Sarah, would you mind just going through a bit of imposter syndrome and just explaining maybe what it is, if that's all right?
Yeah, of course. So imposter syndrome is that feeling that you don't deserve your success, that you're a fraud, you're going to be found out. It kind of is all stemming around from a lack of confidence, but it is a little bit more than that. It's just that kind of, if you're sitting in a meeting with a client and you're kind of feeling like, I don't deserve to be here, as if you've achieved success through some form of fluke or luck, or just sheer chance, which of course isn't the case at all. And it's all about talking about those things, I think, with other people, because when we're working in an office environment, then we might have those kind of water cooler moments, and we might go, I've been invited to do a presentation for the board next week, and God, I'm wrecking it. Like, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I've got the confidence. And your work friends would just go, oh yeah, man, I was asked to do that last month, and I was really nervous too. But you can do this. You've done X, Y, Z. You've got the confidence to do this. You'll be absolutely fine. And then because you talk about it in the moment, that takes the power away from the feeling. But when you're working on your own and you are feeling isolated and you don't necessarily have that community around you and that network of people who are going to support you and big you up, it's really easy to kind of go in on yourself on those feelings and just end up kind of thinking, God, I can't do this. And then you work yourself up in your brain and you just kind of end up undermining the little confidence that you've got. And it's really easy to doubt yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it definitely is. Yeah, I've definitely been in places. Go on, Slater.
Go on, Luke. Go on. I've gone then. I'll jump in. I've certainly found that over the last year, obviously starting out as a personal trainer, literally every day kind of becomes that battle internal of, am I good enough to be doing this? That self-confidence. Then you get the clients and you're thinking, oh, am I what they need? And you kind of convince yourself that they're not. And I'm quite an individual kind of person, so I'll go into my own shell and kind of lock myself away and focus on things by myself instead of opening up. But the few times that I do open up, say with my partner or with the lads, it feels so much better because then you look at it logistically, you look at all the things you have achieved, as you say, where you go, actually, I'm worried about doing a consultation next week with someone new. I've done 20 of them in the last 2 months or 3 months or however it is. I've got all that experience. How well did they all go? Right. Well, actually, in reality, I can do this. So it's really good to open up about it because it gives you that fresh perspective as well. So I think that's really interesting, especially at the freelance level. I think it's not just globally as well, but probably a little bit more as freelance because you're on your own. You haven't got those kind of conversations to have with your colleagues, have you?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
No,
this is
no,
where
Or you,
having a community around you is so very important. That's another of the chapters in the book. But actually, you touched on something really important there because in survival skills, I share, I think it's 6 coping strategies for dealing with imposter syndrome. I'm not saying you can ever get it to go away because I don't think it does. But just take the fear out of it. Kind of make imposter syndrome your friend almost, because quite often it will exist to help you to help identify gaps in your knowledge and perhaps areas in which you might need to train or you might need to boost your own skills. But I think it also helps to keep us all humble because nobody wants to become that person who thinks they know it all. But actually, just what you touched on about thinking about, I've got a new client and I've got to do this kind of initial assessment with them or this initial session. Oh, maybe I can't do this. But actually collecting that evidence and going back and going, no, okay, I've done this and I got this feedback, this great feedback from this client 2 weeks ago, and I went through the exact process with them. What worked from that process and what didn't work? And actually just taking the time to review what worked and what didn't work. That's a really great way of having that awareness and going, okay, I'm going to do more of what, it sounds so blasted obvious, doesn't it? But I'm going to do more of what works and less of what doesn't. But actually collecting that evidence, that is a way of kind of reassuring and like creating this stronger feeling inside yourself, this self-belief that you can do this. And if it is something new, I think stepping outside your comfort zone is such an important thing to do. It's comfort zone, stretch zone, and panic zone, isn't it? And anytime you're in your stretch zone, which is something that maybe is slightly outside your comfort zone, maybe it's something you haven't done before, but it's one of those things where you do it and you get this incredible rush of confidence and this rush of adrenaline and like, I did it. And doing those little slightly uncomfortable things on a regular basis, that is how we grow as individuals and as freelance business owners. And it's such an important thing to do.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And so in the past, I've ran my own businesses before, and that was something that I felt that pressure when I had staff of the imposter syndrome because you're kind of sat in a position, and even now. So I'm a manager in a fairly large business, and there's days where you're doing tasks maybe for the first time, and you think, "Am I really able to do this?" And I'm a pretty confident guy. I'll talk to anyone about anything, and I will give anything a go. But where you say that stretch period, I find myself almost craving those stretch periods.
Yeah.
I want to. Earlier in my career, I definitely tried to avoid them at times, but now I've probably found a place where, as you say, that rush of confidence and adrenaline when I have achieved those things, I've almost become like, I need more of that. I want to find more of that because I'm
It's
on
time.
that trajectory of trying to improve and try and be better. And the podcast for us, all of us, is this exact thing. We are just a group of normal guys who have no background in podcasting. I work in marketing, not podcasting. Ethan works in commercial billing, not podcasting. Matt works in personal training, not podcasting. So we're all even just doing this out of our comfort zone. What was really interesting though, and the thing that resonated with me the most there was where you said it's around community building and finding those people around you who can help you with maybe some of the struggles that you have, and it's all about your network and stuff. So how have you done that effectively? Like, what did you do to make sure that you had the right community around you to enable you to be successful?
Well, I think this comes back to the first 10 years of me as a freelance business owner, just not having any of that, because 1999, no social media, no communities, no Facebook groups, no Twitter chats, whatever. And and I think that is a big part of why I struggled. And I genuinely believe that anybody who is freelance today has it potentially so much easier, because all those supportive communities are out there. They do exist. I didn't do any networking for my business for the first 10 years. I just thought networking was, I was in my late 20s, and I just thought networking was for middle-aged men in suits. Nothing against middle-aged men in suits, but I kind of thought it was this serious sort of like old school
Formal.
chamber of commerce type of federation of small businesses or whatever. I just didn't think it was for me. And I think my business had been going 10, 12 years before I ever set foot in a networking event. And I was lucky. I got found a really nice, super friendly, super low-key, casual, just take your laptop along on a Friday, and it's just all a bit of co-working. Basically, it was co-working before co-working was a thing. And I met some really nice people. They were all local. And I thought, God, this is a bit of a game changer. So I think over the years, I think when it comes to networking and growing your own community, there's a lot of test and measure, isn't there? There's a lot of trying, experimenting, scrapping that one, that's not for me. You have to try the different things and just see what works for you. And certainly when I realized that online communities were a thing, in terms of really recent timescale, at the start of COVID, I thought, God, we're not going to be able to network at all. And I actually pulled together a small group. I think there were 7 of us, fellow copywriters, some of whom I'd only met once before, but we'd been out for a Christmas meal. I think it was the year before, 2019. And I thought, okay, let's set these people up in a WhatsApp group, and we're now copy sisters, and we support one another through everything, like absolutely everything. And it's probably more personal issues than it is professional, to be fair. So there are things like, I've got this challenge with a client. How would you tackle this? I've got this pricing issue. How would you price this job? Because this isn't the sort of thing I've done before. What would you guys charge for this? And all the kind of practical side, that's great. But then we support one another through relationship issues, challenges with our kids, with our finances, everything, absolutely everything. And having that is just such a game changer, even if it doesn't have to be a huge community. But there are so many groups out there that are strong. Facebook groups, actually, some of the great freelance Facebook groups have just moved away from Facebook into paid communities. So I'm not as comfortable kind of recommending them now, but they are out there. And it's just so nice to have like-minded people. But in kind of a traditional sense, we might have gone, oh, that person's another freelance copywriter, they are the competition. But I think community over competition every single time, because those people who are doing the same job as you, particularly as freelancers, they are the people that have the ability to empathize, to understand what you're going through, to really, truly support you, and not just pay lip service and go, oh yeah, you'll be fine. Because they've been through these same challenges, they can just be there for you and support you, and more than anything, kind of help you realize that you're really not alone, and there are other people out there who understand. And that is just so, so powerful.
Yeah.
Sarah, just before Lou jumps in again, this should be called the Everyman podcast. because he's just hugging these this morning. But you've made some great points there, and I just want to throw your points towards Slater. So obviously Lewis, as he mentions on every episode, he used to play for Plymouth Argyle. He's had his own businesses before.
I haven't said that once. Oh.
So every episode he mentions he's run his own business, and it's honestly so. But Matthew Slater, you're currently in the trenches, and your Sarah's made some great points there. Now I want to throw this to you because no offense, I'm going to throw you in the bus in front of Sarah, but you are shocking at social media. You are like the worst at
I'm
social
shocking
media.
at a lot of things.
But the thing is, Slater, you are a phenomenal personal trainer, and you are so knowledgeable. You practice what you preach as well. And I just want to know what we can do to maybe enhance your social media, but also what your community looks like a bit. Like Sarah's mentioned, she had a strong community. Obviously, fair enough, there's the personal aspect as well as the working relationship. And I want to know if you've got that by your side, Slater, because obviously that could be something that really benefits you moving forward in the next 12 months of your journey.
No, I really appreciate that, Ethan, because it's them conversations where how can we help you? You kind of take as a granted that people know, but they don't. Certainly when you mention the social media one, I think that a lot comes down to the imposter syndrome and that self-confidence to get out there and just post something. You'll have seen every now and then I try and get into a swing of things just to get the content out there and start practicing it and start getting used to it. I try and get Esther, my partner. It's no joke that she's a older lady, but I try and get Esther to keep me accountable to that. But sometimes that's not quite enough because you can come up with the excuses why you haven't done it. In terms of the community side of that, I've got a little bit of that in the gym, which I'm really, really lucky and grateful for. But it's still quite vague. It's every now and then you'll touch base if people are having breaks at the same time. You might get 5 minutes of a quick chat. So you never really get to properly delve into those problems. And after you've mentioned that, Sarah, it's something that in the gym that I work at, it's probably going to be really good to kind of build that a little bit more and kind of get the personal trainers together, because there's a few of us in the same situation where we've just started out in the last year, so we're all kind of going through our own journeys. There's been a few little conversations here and there about social media and pricing and how you have those difficult conversations with clients, but maybe starting to build a community like that with the personal trainers in the gym. Once a month having a check-in where we have an afternoon where it's either a coffee or something like that, just to get a little bit more time together. Obviously, with being a freelance and personal trainer, not everyone's always got that time. They've got families and things like that. But it would be good just to, especially because I work with such a good group of people in that gym. They're all fantastic personal trainers and all bring their own experiences from life as well. So definitely building that community. In terms of what you can do, Ethan, probably hold us accountable. Say what's your plan, what's your plan for social media, and give me feedback as well, because if you put something out there and I'm telling myself it's rubbish or it's not hit the marks that I wanted it to, it's not actually engaging people, even if that's true, if you say to me, Slater, listen, that post, I just felt it was a little bit too long in terms of what you were saying. I know you joke to us, Ethan, that I get too sciencey and I need to break it down into layman's terms sometimes, but that's the kind of feedback I need and the kind of just little check-ins that I need. So things like that really make it a little bit easier to just kind of move forward with it, as you say, to keep moving forward. So that would be really great. And then just maybe checking in as well. I think we all take it for granted that we're checking with each other, but sometimes it's easy, especially when you're just messaging, because we're so limited in face-to-face time, that it's easy enough just to say, I don't need to talk about what I'm going through today. I've had a tough day. I'll deal with it myself, because that's the way I am as a person. But maybe I think, and this goes back to the whole mental health thing, is ask the question, how are you doing? How's your day really been? Take that extra little bit of time. And this is everyone with everyone. It's not just you do it to me, it's do it to your family, do it to your friends, because that 2 minutes extra time makes such a huge difference to someone when they're going through it in the trenches, when they've got a bad day and they're thinking, Christ, what am I doing this for? Why am I doing this? Everything's rubbish. You
Mhm.
taking that time, and as Sarah says, a problem shared kind of loses its heaviness and its impact
Yeah.
on you. So you can then go and have a proper chat about it. And sometimes all it takes is that 2 minutes at the water cooler in the office to say, "Oh, I'm having a rubbish day. I'm really stressed that I've got all this work on." And you're going, "Oh, it'll be all right. We'll be at the weekend soon. You know, we've got this to look forward to." But it's quite a solitary life, as Sarah said, as a freelancer, and you can get caught up in that way. You're very individual. I've got to do all this, which is one of the myths I see in the book, where you take the responsibility for it all. But sharing it definitely makes an impact, and I think that's across the board with everyone really, and mental health especially. So that's something I think we all need to keep in mind more, because I think we say it, but how often we act on it, probably less than we should. So definitely.
Exactly, Slater. Exactly, mate.
Yeah,
So just about those little small conversations. What were you going to say, Lou?
Exactly.
no, I was going to
It's
say
Luke's
that the
time to
one
speak,
that really.
Slater, don't worry.
Thanks, Ethan. So, Sarah, you will always find this, right? And I'm going to call him out on this. On every episode, Ethan likes to try and play a bit of the clown, bless him. It's his way of being funny. And it does make everyone laugh, which is great. So, well done, mate. You've done it again. There's another tick. We're just going to wait for the Rob and Ryan next. Sarah, the myth that really stood out to me was myth 7, which was around, I think it was, I love my job, every day should be a good day. And that's where you really went into the ideas around sort of mental health and how people can support their mental health. I think that would be really beneficial for us to talk to. It's probably the most relevant topic in terms of what we talk about all the time as a group of guys, and what sort of our focus is within a podcast. So So most people will go into freelancing and think, okay, as you said before, I'm potentially good at copywriting, or I'm good at design, so therefore I should be a great freelance copywriter or designer.
Yeah.
So because I'm good at it, I will love it. But actually, the reality is what you're saying. You don't spend all of your time, especially at the beginning, doing the thing you love, because you have to essentially run your own business.
Yeah.
So what and how did you, and do you, look after your own mental health whilst running your own business? Like, how do you do that? Because I think that's something that Slater's probably alluded to slightly there. It is a challenge to look after yourself while trying to run your own business.
Yeah, there's so much to touch on with this subject, isn't there? I think, yeah. I think this is the stuff that people don't realize, because, as you say, you think, right, I'm a great copywriter, I'm a great graphic designer, I'm a great painter and decorator, whatever it is, I'm going to be great as a freelancer. But actually, not everybody does have the right combination of character traits, for example. So I don't think everybody is cut out for freelance life. And I think even the strongest among us, and I'm not one of those people, I've struggled, I think I just said that I've struggled with low mood my whole life. And now I know really well what works for me. But it took me ages to work that out. And it took me ages also to realize that I had to prioritize my own mental health and physical health, because if I didn't, I would have I'd have nothing left to give. So if I'm just saying yes to everything, I'm saying yes to every piece of work that comes my way, regardless of whether or not it's a good fit with my business, with my skill set, with where I want my business to develop, and how I want myself to develop as an individual business owner. And then what happens is that you kind of end up, you're overworked, you're overwhelmed, and then overwhelm quite often leads to burnout. The subtitle of the book is Tried and Tested Tips to Help You Ace Self-Employment Without Burnout. And that's the reason. And yeah, as you say, to be perfectly honest, I haven't reread Survival Skills for Freelancers for a little while, so I can't remember specifically what I cover in Myth 7. But what I do know is that the stuff that we don't realize is this, the isolation, the imposter syndrome, I think there's kind of a toxic positivity culture, particularly in, maybe less so on LinkedIn than before COVID, because I do think COVID the one positive to come out of COVID is that we all talk about our mental health a lot more. It's less of a taboo subject. It's less something that we feel ashamed of, and we're all hopefully much better at being open, and we're getting there. We're all trying really hard to kind of to be more open and more authentic about the challenges that we face. But I don't know if you guys have noticed that on LinkedIn quite often there's like, oh yeah, you know, 5-figure month and all this kind of, oh yeah, self-employment is great. Well, actually, that's not helping anybody. That's really not helping anybody. And I feel really strongly about this, and I get quite cross. I try not to engage too much with posts like this, but I get quite cross when I see this, because there is this feeling of, when you're doing a job you love, you'll never work a day in your life. You know, that quote has got so much to answer for, because we feel that when we are having a bad day, or we're having a bad week, or we're struggling with our mental health, or we just don't have the work coming in, puts a heck of a lot of pressure on your emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically, all of this. And because of that stupid quote that just tends to go around in the back of your head, you know, God, well, you know, I love writing, and I'm getting paid to be a writer, but I'm still not happy. Like, what the hell is wrong with me? That is just such a common thought pattern. And I think, again, to recognize that you're not the only person who feels that way. Everybody is going through that to a certain degree. I think there's an awful lot of this emperor's new clothes kind of thing going on social media, particularly people going, oh yeah, you know, like yeah, 6-figure freelancers and all this kind of culture. Whereas to me, success is about so much more than money, so much more. Today's actually my day off, so I'm talking to you guys on my day off, but normally I don't work Fridays. I stopped working Fridays when I turned 50, and that for me has been a game changer. I would say I still get the same amount of work done within 4 days than I ever did in 5. But for me, being able to have the opportunity to pursue the other things that I love doing, to spend more time out in nature, for me is a really big one. Exercising is a really big one, huge. I try to build exercise into my day every single day. And I think what happens is we think, God, you know, I'm working, I should be. But actually, if you think about when you're working in an office, how much time during your day do you kind of spend, like, you know, thinking about things and going into the kitchen, having a chat with your colleagues and talking about last night's game on TV, or whatever it is you're watching, or whatever you did last night. And when we're freelance, we don't do that, because we've got nobody to talk to half the time. And every minute we're not physically sitting in front of our computer, working, staring at the screen, typing away, we feel that we're cheating almost. Yeah. But it's quite the opposite, because actually, particularly as a freelance creative, I need changes of scene. I need fresh air, exercise. I need all those things when I'm swimming, for example. I actually came up with the title for Survival Skills. Originally, it had a subtitle, How to Go Solo Without Going Loco. I bloody loved it, but I ended up ditching it. But there's a long story behind that, which I won't go into. But I came up with that when I was swimming one day. And I find that when you're not thinking about what the problem is, or the
creative juices flow.
Exactly. It boosts your productivity, your creativity, your focus, your motivation, your flow, all those things. So actually, when you think, Slaty was saying about, it's amazing. I think what you just said about getting an idea of getting together, even if it's just once a month for an hour, chatting over coffee, you know, how can you guys support one another? What are the challenges you're all facing? And actually to realize, you say that these are all great personal trainers, and I'm sure that's true, but I'm sure they also all have their own imposter syndrome. I'm sure they also are all facing challenges. And I just reckon that's going to be such a fantastic thing. And I definitely think you should do it, and let me know how you get on. But when you're doing that and you kind of think, oh God, I can't afford to take an hour out of my week, because this is time I'm not getting paid for. But because it is time invested into your mental health and your mindset and your community and boosting your network, you never know. It might also have the knock-on effect of getting more work for you, because one of those personal trainers might not like working with, say, older clients or clients with sports injuries, for example, but that might be your thing. And they might go, oh, do you know what? Do you want me to introduce you to this client? So actually taking that time and putting that as a non-negotiable in your calendar, in your schedule, every single week, I need to spend time working on growing my network, building my relationships, marketing my business, the social media side of things. Yeah, not everybody's comfortable with it, but the more you do it, it's in the stretch zone for you by the sound of it. The more you do it, the better you become. And the better you become, the more your confidence grows and the better you get. So yeah, I feel like I've kind of blurred a lot of stuff out there.
No, it was really good.
But
it was really good. I think when you talk about the lone working, you need to get out and exercise and stuff. I think a lot of us felt that in the pandemic. So since the pandemic, I work from home more than I ever did. And where I'm trying to make this probably more relatable, other than just freelancers, because this affects all of us.
Absolutely.
Since a lot of us now work from home, I feel really guilty if I'm working from home and I go and sit downstairs for half an hour and eat my lunch. But in the office, I will walk to the canteen and sit and have dinner with friends or colleagues and have a bit of a laugh and stuff, and then go back. But at home, I feel like I have to just be on call, and I don't actually. It's really hard to actually do some work.
Doesn't help anybody's productivity though, does it? Nobody can work like that. You have to take these breathing space moments. You have to just take half an hour, just go outside, walk around the block, take the dog for a walk, go on a quick bike ride or whatever, because actually when you come back, you are going to be so much more focused, so much more productive. Nobody can sit and work facing the screen. Like, you just can't do it. It just kills your creativity. I talk a lot about doing, sorry, Lewis, kind of cutting you off a little bit with your topic.
It's okay. No, it's okay.
There's a whole, the kind of the early part of the book, before I go into busting the 8 myths of self-employment, there is a whole section on working from home and being productive. Staying motivated. This is when I realized I've got no water on my desk. Staying motivated, staying productive and focused, how to work and avoid distractions. And all that stuff relates to everybody, not just self-employed people, because not everybody is cut out for working at home. Most people who work for a company and choose an employed role do so, or many people, not most necessarily, but many people who work for a business do so because they thrive on that environment of being in this busy, buzzy office environment with the banter and the chat and the noise and the kind of, there's always something going on. But we don't sit, when we're employed, we don't sit in front of our screen and just type all day.
No,
That's
no,
not how you get things done. So I feel as if sometimes we need to take a bit more of that feeling of being employed into being your own boss, and not be so hard on ourselves, because we are our own worst critic at the end of the day. Probably, I mean, another of the topics that I cover in the book is negative self-talk, and who isn't guilty of that? And that can kind of become this spiral. If you make a mistake, you're just berating yourself, and it does have a negative impact on your self-worth, and that's a long-term impact, not just a short-term issues. So there's so much to think about, but all the advice in the book, the imposter syndrome doesn't just impact freelancers, it doesn't just impact self-employed people, it impacts 86% of the UK workforce, male, female, intern to the CEO, however experienced you are, however skilled you are, whether you're new or you're super experienced. So many of the topics don't just relate to freelance life.
Yeah, I definitely took that, and there was lots of things I was reading that I really related to, which was really interesting. Ethan, it looked like you're about to jump in there, mate.
Yeah, I was just about to say, Sarah, you've hit the nail on the head with my own duties at work. So I'm not freelance, I've not had the experience that Lou and Slate have had. But when I was sort of in a call center environment, if I was meant to be glued at my desk, taking calls or on deadlines and things like that, I would obviously find myself wandering, because I'm quite a social butterfly. So, there's a joke at work where my current manager claims she used to hate us because we used to really clash because I would never be at my desk taking these calls because, you know, I wanted to go talk. I'd be at the toilet 20 times a day. I'd fill my water up, or anything I could do to get away from answering a call, I would. But, you know, in the past sort of 9 months or so, especially since the pandemic, I've took on more of a role where it's sort of an account manager role. And
Brilliant.
I now have the responsibility within my job. It's not that I'm glued at a desk, but I am managing workloads, rather than call after call or this, that, and the other. And I'm now in a place where I can respect my job more, and I've got more pride in my job because of that. And I've got the freedom to manage my day. So, you know, although I'm probably not working to the levels that Slater and Lou have in the past or currently, I do understand where you come from. That having that ability to work and sort of manage your own day and manage your own hours is really important to that work-life balance, you know, and I think it's key as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
We are so
Sure.
much more than our jobs, aren't we? And I think it's really easy to kind of lose sight of that and to neglect the other things that make you happy and that bring you joy. And when you realize that you can incorporate those things into your life. And I mean, that's what we talk about when we talk about work-life balance. There's a lot of people, particularly on Twitter, oh, there's no such thing as work-life balance when you're self-employed. You've got to work all the hours. Well, yeah, maybe to begin with, you kind of do have to put in the hours to get started and to start building your reputation and going out there and becoming known from for what you do and the problems that you solve and the people that you work for. That's important stuff. But after a while, if you don't take care of yourself, it's like that phrase, isn't it? That analogy. Is it an analogy? I'm not sure. But that expression, you've got to put your own oxygen mask on first. You know, if you're in a situation in a plane, you can't help those around you, because if you don't help yourself first, you've got nothing left to give. And yeah, and I found that in my own experience. I don't want other people to go through that. And I actually, just going back to something that Matthew, you said earlier on when you were talking about the guys that you work with in the gym. And also, Lewis, this was really important. I think your LinkedIn post this week about people say, oh, you know, oh yeah, hey, how you doing? And you're like, oh yeah, I'm good, thanks, you. And it's just like a reflex. We don't kind of go, I've had a really shit day and I'm really struggling with this. And we just don't do that. So I trained as a mental health first aider last year. And I'm quite proud of the fact that I was shortlisted for Freelancer of the Year in the mental health and wellbeing category for writing.
Oh, well done.
Survival skills for freelancers.
Fantastic.
Thank you. There are so many books out there, and I'm realizing I'm going off a tangent again, but there are so many books out there that talk about the practical side, how to set up a business. Do you need a business bank account, a pension, personal, what's the insurance called? Public liability insurance, or whatever, on the practical side. But when I wrote Survival Skills, there was nothing out there that talked about the mindset and the mental health challenges and the balance and the boundaries and how very important they are in terms of avoiding overwhelm and burnout and just actually getting this more enjoyment from self-employment. But now I've completely forgotten what the other thing was I was talking about.
You were talking about that. You said there was another point with Slater.
Yes. Yeah. So if you ask somebody and they go, yeah, I'm good, and you're kind of like, really? Are you really okay? So always ask twice, because it's amazing actually if somebody realizes that you really do care. You're not just asking that kind of knee-jerk automated question that we all do when we see somebody.
It's lost all emotion in personal conversations with people.
Absolutely.
There's no truth behind the question anymore. It's, hi, you're right. Yeah, you. Yeah, good, thanks. What do you want?
It's just a
That's
standard
basically
call
what
and
it is.
response.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
I spend my life literally on calls and writing emails, replying to emails to people, running a project that we have in our business. And there's a few people where we consciously make the effort. When we get on a call, we will spend the first 2, 3, 5 minutes, whatever. How are you? What's going on in your life? Everything all right? It doesn't even have to go to that degree. Just, are you okay? Is everything all right? Is there anything I can help you with work-wise that's stressing you out? Anything you can help me? And since doing that, and it's such a tiny little tweak, it allows us to have such a better working relationship, especially where we work for a huge business and we're all remote, or we might not be remote, might just be in different offices. It just allows us to have better relationships with people, and I think that's what life's really all about. Is you
True
can't go
connection.
through life, you can't go through life just being by yourself, having your own insular conversations. It's actually building connections with people, because
Yeah.
that's where we thrive, and that's where we learn and grow and develop and feel that sense of belonging or positivity, and doing things proactively in your day to encourage that versus just going through the motions will, in my experience, has enabled me to have a much happier work-life balance, and because
Mm.
it doesn't feel like every day work is work. I'm getting some more of that personal element to it as well.
Yeah. And
I think
building these
it's
relationships and those connections, whether you're freelance or you're employed, is just what life's about.
Yeah. Ethan, I
yeah,
think you're about to
exactly.
jump in there.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, touching on what he was saying there, like a common phrase I'll always use is sort of, if someone says you're, I'll say living the dream. That's sort of like my
Mm.
cliche thing around work, and I think what you mentioned there, it is great, and especially Sarah, what you're saying about asking twice, sort of really not being afraid to have that conversation with someone. I think for me, as personally, it's always tough to sort of maybe have that conversation because you don't want to be seen as less than in someone else's eyes, especially maybe a peer,
Mm.
or have this a manager, or yourselves on this podcast. You don't want to be seen less than, and it's trying to break down that barrier. I think when you're having that conversation with someone and being willing to sort of be vulnerable and say, well, no, I'm having a bit of a tough day, like this happened this morning, or I've had a rough night. And obviously, Lewis has got a young family, a young little boy. His sleep sometimes can be a bit knocked, and I've never heard him really complain, but obviously that'll take its toll. It's about trying to find that level of being able to be vulnerable, but not
Yeah.
expose yourself too much.
I think it's even harder though. So it's relatively easier for me and you, Ethan, because our personal identity and work isn't damaged by us saying we're struggling as much. It's not, because work has that HR system, it has processes in place to support. I imagine it's even harder as a freelancer, because your identity to your clients is like that's your reputation.
Yeah.
Unless you
Absolutely.
get on a certain level with them, they are paying you for a service, and they just want to get their value for money. So if
Mm.
you potentially open up of being slightly lower, you're low mood, or you're struggling a little bit, do they then see less value in your service and are then
Mm.
less likely to reinvest in and pay
Mm.
for what you're providing? And I imagine that's probably a really tough thing to be able to balance.
Mm. Yeah, I think so. And I think another thing, you sort of touched on this just there, but I think another thing that we don't acknowledge often enough is that big businesses and corporates are getting so much better at investing in a mental health first aider for their team, or a pastoral person. I don't even know, what would you call it, like employee assistance
Well-being,
programs.
like well-being and stuff.
Yeah, well-being representatives and that kind of thing. And it's okay to go and talk to somebody if you're having a challenging time or whatever. But freelancers, we don't have the luxury of that support. We have to be that support for ourselves. And I think if we don't realize that taking care of our own mental health is super important, we need to support ourselves. We literally will have no freelance business left, because if you crash and burn, your business crashes and burns with you. So, yeah, I take your point completely about, do we want to admit to our clients? I think a lot of people feel that that would be one step of vulnerability too far. I would just rather be authentically me. I'm not one of these people who has a business persona and a I was going to say a business persona and a work persona. You know what I mean? Like,
Like
I'm
a
not one
personal and a work.
person. Yeah,
You're the same
exactly.
person
I'm
every
not
day.
two different people. So social media for me is super easy because I am just me. And what you have to realize, I think, as a freelancer, is that me being like authentically me. I'm quite neurodiverse. I've not long actually acknowledged that myself. I don't talk about it a lot, but my clients do know on the whole, and I'm kind of like, well, what this means is that XYZ, you know, I might be a bit too direct sometimes and not really think it through or whatever, but I would rather, I masked that for so many years, I would far rather be authentically and openly myself and work with people who get that and who kind of almost see that as a superpower in itself, rather than the people who go, yeah, do you know what? I don't really want to work with you because you're admitting some level of vulnerability. I don't want to work with those people. They are not my people. So in a way, it becomes sort of a self-selecting thing. And if the people that you are putting your whole self out there to in your marketing and in being yourself on your social media, if there are people who go, no, you shouldn't be being vulnerable in your social media, you shouldn't be talking about mental health challenges or whatever it is, then I've lost those people, and that's good with me. I am totally embracing of that fact, because anybody who feels that way about somebody who admits vulnerability is not somebody I want to work with. And I fought through that for, as I say, the first 10 years of really being quite rubbish as a freelancer. And I would say yes to every piece of work that came my way. And I would work with everybody, regardless of whether or not they were a fit with my business or what made me happy or what brought me joy in my everyday work. I've changed that now completely. I say no probably more than I say yes. And it's really important to do that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Slater, how do you find that?
Yeah, it's especially starting out. You as you say, you take as much work as you can get, and you work with all the different kind of people. In terms of my vulnerability, I think it's selective on the clients and how receptive they would be. I've got clients where we're as open as anyone else would be with each other, and we have really deep conversations about how the week's been, because they appreciate me opening up, so they open up as well. It's that shared vulnerability. You're in it together. Whereas some clients aren't necessarily like that. And for me, on a day-to-day basis, I don't necessarily feel the need to continuously open up, so I can have those different ranges of clients. But it certainly is useful there, having clients that you do share with. I think when it comes down to working with clients, as you say, Sarah, taking work that you kind of have to change yourself for, it's such a big energy waste, because you're putting all this energy into not being who you are and distracting yourself from the real target of your work, and then that has a knock-on effect to everything else. So I certainly think that's a factor as well. I necessarily don't yet feel like I've came across that too much, but obviously it's an ever-changing situation for me, and I'm always aware that could, become up to a point where certain clients, don't meet my needs as well as me not meeting their needs, and just being aware of that and having the confidence to say no, as you say, is going to be really important going forward, because certainly I find myself taking early clients and late clients. So I say finishing the gym at 10 o'clock at night and I'm in at 6 o'clock in the morning, and that kind of balance, because at the minute I'm saying yes to everything, actually is that more detrimental, because I'll go to bed at 11, 12 o'clock and then I'm getting up at 5 a.m. I'm a little bit tired in the morning, then that has a knock-on effect to the morning clients. So it's just being aware of actually, as much as the situation that I'm in, saying no is actually probably long-term going to be more beneficial to me, instead of saying yes to everyone, because then it's, as you say, going to lead to that burnout where you're continuously just not able to be the person
perform at your best.
are, and
Absolutely.
you want to be.
I think the thing is to recognize the signs before you get there, because it's too easy to get to burnout before actually seeing that it's coming, and if you can do something about that. But then again, maybe early mornings and end of the day could be a pattern if you take time off during the middle of the day and you're doing something that restores you during the day. You're taking some time to relax or do the things that you enjoy doing that aren't work related, because as I say, we don't go freelance to echo the 9 to 5 that we do when we're employed. I think another thing that's important to mention actually is the fact that the more you are authentically yourself in business, employed or self-employed, the less likely you are to experience that imposter syndrome, because you are being true to who you are. And there isn't this big gap between oh, I'm trying to be this person, I'm trying to pretend to be this professional person and act in a certain way and speak in a certain way. And yeah, just the less you can, the more you can be authentically true to who you are, the less gap there is for that imposter syndrome to creep in. Because you are, you know, part of imposter syndrome is feeling like a fraud. But if you're not being a fraud, if you are being authentic to who you are, then there's less potential for that to happen.
Yeah, I think that's it's a really good point, and it translates to so many different areas, not even just in business, but in your life. We all pretend to be something to a degree, but actually doing the hard work to being that person. So if you're pretending you know all about certain things, go and learn about it. Then you don't have to pretend. It's like
Yeah.
if you have to give a presentation, for example, I give presentations at work all the time, and when I'm not 100% clear on the information, I get that little bit of anxiety. Oh, what if they ask me this? Oh, I don't know. But then when it's something that I fully know and it's my stuff and I know what it is, you can deliver it so much better. You're not wasting brain energy thinking about what could. You're thinking, no, I really want to land this bit because this is the message. This is what I'm clear on. Yeah, so I think there's lots of that probably translates to lots of different areas actually. So that's really helpful. Sarah, we are getting close to having to sort of wrap this up just as we're hitting sort of the hour mark. Before we do get into that sort of final phase, I suppose what would be really interesting for me is what would your advice be, generally speaking? So if someone is working from home or they are a self-employed freelancer and they are struggling with probably the work-life balance, the imposter syndrome, they are struggling a little bit with their mental health, what are a few practical things that they can do to to make that sort of transition to working from home or working for themselves much easier?
Well, the obvious one, and I'm not saying this because I make money from it. I make about £4 a copy on a sale. But just because I know how much it's helped people's mental health already, and as I say, like 28 different countries around the world, just
Yeah.
invest £15 in a copy of Survival Skills because all those topics are covered.
Yeah.
People have said how reassuring the book is because it is very hard on your sleeve. So it's very real. You've been listening to me on this podcast. You hear my voice throughout the book. It's reassuring, it's supportive, and it kind of encourages you that you're not alone with any of these things. Certainly try to find a community that works for you. It might be a Slack group, it might be joining in with a Twitter chat once a week, answering some of the questions there, getting to know some of the people there. Set up your own WhatsApp group with your own colleagues who you know are doing the same job as you, and kind of get to know them better. You don't have to already have that existing relationship to set up a community, or look for a community on Facebook. Matthew, I'm sure that there is a community of freelance personal trainers on Facebook. I would put money on it. I don't know for a fact, but I'd be definite that there would be a community of freelance personal trainers or fitness professionals on Facebook. And there are things out there. And I think one thing that's worth mentioning is that when you join these communities, don't look at it as, what can I get out of this community? I think it's really important to build awareness of who you are, but kind of build awareness of yourself being a generous person who's there to help and support others. So it's like give more than you take. If you kind of look to give 4 times more than you take, at least initially, be generous with your advice and your own support and your own information. Don't go on there and go, oh, you know, can I find a new client on here? Kind of be prepared to be vulnerable. You talked about that. There are certain clients that you feel that you can share and be a little bit vulnerable with, and in response, they'll be vulnerable in return. And talk about that in the book. It's called a vulnerability loop. I didn't know this before I wrote the book. And yeah, it's when you share a little bit of something that kind of puts a bit of you out there, and then that gives the person that you're having the conversation with the confidence to do the same. And that is how great relationships are built. It's just kind of the fundamentals of great relationships. But yeah, do realize that you're not alone. Talk to other people. Get really clear on your boundaries. there's nothing wrong with saying in your, I mean, for me, notifications are a huge distraction. And I'll actually have this is a very specific tip. I have an out of office set every single day. And apart from Fridays, when it says it's my day off, it says, thanks for getting in touch. I check my emails just a couple of times a day so I can focus on writing hardworking copy for my clients. I'll get back to you soon. And what that does is that sets me a boundary. That means that the minute I get an email, I'm not pulled off writing a website for somebody. I'm not distracted by the fact that I've got a ping and it's an email and, oh God, I've got to reply. And instantly it tells the client that that I've received their email so that they can expect a response later. It kind of also gives them a secret signal that when I'm working for other clients, I don't get distracted. I don't hop off the task and my focus gets pulled away by all these notifications. So it's sending a really good message to them that I'm somebody who has boundaries and that kind of I respect my time and I respect my client's time at the same time. So that's kind of a good positive thing. But what it does mean is that I can just get on with my work without feeling like, oh my God, everybody needs me. Like I've got a WhatsApp over here and a message on Twitter and something on Messenger and emails galore. Don't be afraid to switch those things off and actually be the boss of those things, because you can't focus when you're distracted. It's so obvious. And if you set those boundaries, that's actually sending a clear signal, like a self-worth signal to yourself. I know that sounds daft, but it's also telling your clients that you respect their time and you respect your own time. It's just part of setting boundaries. There's so much to say, Lewis.
That's a great tip.
But
that is such a great tip.
Good.
I really like that one. It's like I'm looking forward to seeing now emails coming back of, sorry, I'm with clients. I'm busy.
Yeah, that's definitely what I'm going to take away and start setting up on a daily basis. That's such a truth in terms of that distraction, and you almost feel like you've got to reply as well, because you feel like you owe it to people to reply, and then if you've got
an email doesn't need to be that immediate. I think if we don't set that precedent of, oh my God, I got an email, I got to reply to it straight away. Like, how in the hell would you ever manage to give anything 100% of your focus? I could never get into flow. I need to get in a flow state when I'm writing for my clients, and I can't do that if I've got distractions on. So I switch my phone on to do not disturb. All my distractions are switched off on my laptop, and my email is taken care of. And then that just means that frees me up that time, and it's so vital.
Yeah, that is such a brilliant tip. I definitely need to introduce it into my working life as well. I can definitely use that to say, like, I'm busy sort of thing. Very good. Ethan, are we going to move over to your section? Because I think it is, I'm sure, Sarah, you will have, we spoke about your book loads, and we can definitely speak about it again. But I feel like Ethan's going to ask you a question, because I'm really interested to see what's helped you.
Definitely. So, Sarah, what we tend to ask is our guests, it's something called see no evil, hear no evil, or hear no evil, see no evil, depending which way I get it round on the day. But basically, we ask our guests, along your journey, and it's been a long and fruitful one leading up to your book, which is across several countries, and it's fantastic. But what we want to know is what sort of podcasts, books, and even films, if you can't think of any off the top of your head, that have sort of maybe drove you along the way, or something that continues to drive you today?
Ooh, okay. Podcasts. Yeah, do you know what? I go through phases of listening to podcasts. There are like way too. I've appeared on 60. I feel like to pick
That's
out
a great
one
flex, by the way. That is a great flex.
What's a
That's
flex?
a big flex.
That's like a well done. Like, how would you describe a flex, Ethan?
It's showing off almost. Like,
Don't
not in a negative
like
way.
humble brag.
But it's
It's
just
a humble
like,
brag.
it's
a bit of a
humble brag.
Yeah,
Humble
it's very,
brag.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Well,
No,
I was
it's
just
good.
going
It's a
to
good
say
thing.
that I feel like I couldn't pick out what. There are so many out there there is actually a podcast page, because this podcast will also end up on the podcast page. So if anybody's starting out as a freelancer, I always kind of direct them to that podcast page, because there's so much free advice out there, and then kind of listen to a few different freelance podcasts and see what works for you. So I don't feel like I can shout out one single one. I couldn't find a book, Ethan, when I started out that spoke to me. I felt as if everything was, like, nothing against very American sounding books, but everything was written by like middle-aged American guys and very like rah rah, and it just didn't speak to me. I was in my late 20s, I was starting out as a parent, starting a freelance business. I couldn't find anything that worked, and that's precisely why I wrote Survival Skills. In terms of, oh gosh, oh no, I could have done with some prep for this one, couldn't I?
Don't worry
Sarah,
about
you
it.
did say that Sarah, you said no questions.
No questions
so
involved.
we are absolutely
My own fault.
Yeah, so it doesn't even have to be that it's helped you through. So is there a film or a book or anything that has helped you through any stage of your life? It doesn't necessarily have to be work. Something that you would recommend to listeners. You obviously have a daughter. Has there been a Disney film? Has there been a rom-com? Has there been a comedy film, for example, that may have helped you through some basically shit times?
I'll tell you what, actually, I'm going to give a shout out to a book that I read actually really pretty recently, who's written by Dr. Nick Hooper. And it's called The Unbreakable Student. My daughter, like me, has had mental health challenges throughout her life. And she was a student during COVID. And I think that really, really didn't help. I think it's been very difficult for a lot of students out there. But I wish I'd read this book when she was at uni. My son's now 20 and he's at uni. Studying English and creative writing, so taking after his mum. But I really wish this book had been out when Amy was at university, because it's brilliant. It's written by this guy, I think he's a psychologist, but he's also a lecturer at university. So it's intended for young people. So anybody who's out there listening, you don't have to be a student. I took so much from it as a parent and just as an individual, just as a human. It's almost like it puts something like the 5 Ways to Wellbeing, but it puts it in a way that is so conversational, so easy to digest. I'd recommend that book to anybody. It really is. It's quite fun. It's quite lighthearted, but there's so much kind of stuff that you can go, yeah, okay, that's really useful. That really works. Practical advice, written in a really human way. So, yeah, The Unbreakable Student.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. And also, if we didn't plug your book enough, let's plug it one last time before we let you go. If you want to get it back on the screen, just one last time.
Yeah. And where can people buy it?
So it's available for sale on Amazon worldwide. It's $14.95, or you can get, for the same price, you can get a signed copy direct from me. Support my small business in the process. The copies that I've got are slightly nicer print than the Amazon ones, because Amazon are printed on demand and they are brilliant. But the litho printed ones that you can get from me are just like slightly nicer quality. So I'm sure you guys will share the links.
Yeah, but if you send all the links over, we'll do all that.
just type Survival Skills for Freelancers into Amazon and have a read, because it's got like 400 and something 5-star reviews, and whatever I say about it is not worth a jot compared to what other people have said about it, because those are people who I don't even know who have read it and have gone, do you know what? This is really giving my mental health a boost. It's really helped me realize I'm not alone. It's really helped me grow in confidence and become more successful, or whatever it is. It just read other people's reviews. I think it's more powerful.
Yeah, no,
Brilliant.
I agree.
Thank
And having read it, and I have to be honest, I did do what you suggested, Sarah. I did fast read it, but I will go back and read it, because there was lots of things that resonated with me and things that I will take away into my employed everyday life.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it was truly brilliant. Well,
Brilliant.
Sarah, honestly, you have been a brilliant guest, our first ever morning guest as well. So thank you very much for coming on. And that's it. Yeah, well, you're our second female, but our first morning. So yeah, we are super grateful. Thank you very much. You've provided so much rich insight and advice for people on today's pod, and I'm sure people will will learn loads from it, but equally they can learn even more by obviously purchasing your book.
Absolute pleasure to talk to you all. Thank you. And with the parent of a 20-year-old lad who's really not one for talking, I just think what you guys are doing is absolutely amazing. So please do keep it up. It's just brilliant, and it's so vital. You're doing amazing work.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go. Time to grind, get inside your mind. Yeah, we working overtime. That's the only way to climb. We gon' make it in our prime. Signing on the dotted line, cashing checks left and right. That's the way I'm living life.